Discover how smarter project insights can lead to better project outcomes.
Hello, project people. Welcome back to a brand new episode of the Project Chatter podcast. It's always great to have you with us. And whilst we don't have Martin with us today, we do have Mr. Dale Fung from London. Hey, Dale, do you recognize this hoodie? This is one of the first merch we ever did. I don't know if you can see that. It says raw on there. We had raw, informal, and informative, and we all bought these little hoodies. But I found this somewhere in the house, and I thought I'd put this back on just for nostalgia reasons. Do you still have yours?
I still have mine. I think I have the informal because
That's
we said you were raw. I was very informal, being South African, and none of us were informative. The guest was informative. So, yeah, I remember that. That takes us back. Wow. But I think we've stayed true to it. I think we stayed raw, informal, and informative. But yeah, I'm liking that you're getting the merch out. I don't have mine on today. Yeah.
Even my coffee mug today has got Project Chatter. So I'm merched up today. Maybe we can get Ines a hoodie, get her into the group. But let's get our guest in here. Ines Lopez, it's a pleasure to have you all the way from Mexico. How are you today?
I'm good, thank you. Nice to meet you guys.
Nice to meet you. And before we press record, we were already getting stuck into this conversation, and what a great title. And as you said before we pressed the button, you know that this word spiritual has different meanings for different people. And I think maybe that's where we should start. But before we even get to that, Ines, maybe we can talk about your background. How did you get into project management? Where did it start for you?
So it was love at first sight at university, right? So it's really funny. I was studying, I am an IT engineer. And on my third year, I think it was, I had a course on project management about PMBOK. My teacher was really good. And I realized that's what I wanted to do because I wanted to be in different projects and with different topics and, change it. I learned more and more. And so when I finished university, I got a kind of a job around doing that. But then I was like, no, I want to leave Spain. So I did a master's on project management in Edinburgh. And then I was applying for project management jobs. And I was lucky enough that I got into TFL, project management graduate program. And they called me on a 24th of December. I always say that it was one of the first Christmas gifts ever. So I spent there a lot of time. I was there from 2011. I did a stint on the games as well. I was Silver Command of the Travel Ambassadors. That was really cool. And I left in 2020. I was in different units. So I worked a lot in highways. So I was the project manager for Vauxhall Gyratory. Well, project sponsor, but for those that, it's kind of similar, right? Different, but similar. So yeah, I was sponsoring Vauxhall Gyratory, which was for 50 million pounds. I also sponsor highway, a hybrid corner gyratory removal. Then I moved on to the air quality team, and I sponsored the Ultra Low Emission Zone. I did the business case for that, which was the first ever business case for TFL on air quality. So yeah, that was a really interesting experience. And then I moved on to the energy and carbon team, and I was the sponsor for the energy program to make TFL zero carbon. So that was, yeah, I really loved it because I was able to move through different things. And I always had this passion about green and sustainability. So when the team about equality came up, I'm like, yeah, I'm going there. And then for carbon as well. And I'm very fond of my years in TFL. I work with really amazing people and I learn a lot.
That's amazing. You might be one of our first guests, or one of our very few guests that kind of knew straight out of the gate, at a university level, hey, I'm going to get project management's for me. This is what I want to do with myself. What was it exactly? Can you remember why project management spoke to you so deeply as opposed to other vocations?
So I think it was the idea of organizing and analyzing. I've always been a bit of a control freak in a way. And I understand now because of my inner journey and my spiritual journey, why this is coming about, right? But the idea of being in charge and thinking about how I solve this problem and this problem, because that was what I was doing in my life as well. Or if I had a conversation with a friend, I would always try to find a solution. So when I found out that there was a way of doing that in projects, plus the idea of I am very curious. I like to learn about different industries and different things. So the idea of a project, right? Like you can do a project in one thing and then in another thing. Mine as well, that I'm a little bit of a rebel. Like in Spain, you only get to work on what you have your degree on. There is something like, I studied IT engineering, so I was supposed to only work on IT projects. And out of the university for about a year and a half, I was doing consultancy on IT, and there was a little bit of project management in there, but I didn't want to stay on IT. So everyone started calling me crazy because what I wanted in Spain was not normal. And I'm like, well, I want to leave Spain anyway, right? So it's this idea of being able to, experience different industries, which I managed to do actually.
No, that's great. I think that's, actually come to think of it, I think that's why Dale and I ended up in project controls as well. That organization part, control, the people element was fantastic. And the curiosity part, like why? There's a big question around why that doesn't get asked. As you said, I think there is still a culture of, if I'm an engineer, then I'm just an engineer. If I'm doing something else, I'm just that role. But there's an expansion role within PM that lets you kind of float between various different things. I mean, your career sounds fantastic. You've done all some amazing things that are still relevant today. And I really appreciate you being on the show. Now, we've always started this show with baselining definitions, because we found that even our own interpretations of things that are said on the show can be misinterpreted. So what does spiritual project management mean to you?
So for me, is the idea or the concept that a project can deliver and should deliver growth for a business, but should also deliver personal growth. And what I mean by personal growth is being able to provide a safe space so that when someone in the team gets a trigger for whatever reason, we can investigate it, we can get to the root cause of it, and we can support that person to shift that energy, because that is energy that is inside that is not serving, right? So rather than getting triggered because we had an argument with a colleague, we go within and we trace it back to, okay, but this means, I don't know, when I was a kid, I was not listened to by my parents. And therefore, if I'm now in a meeting and someone cuts me, when I'm talking, I get really triggered. And it's not necessarily, that is not a good behavior to have, right? Like for someone doing that, but it's not necessarily about that person doing that to me. It's more that I have that program inside of me that makes me get triggered. So it's how we can work with those things.
That's a really good point. I think then, projects are an environment where there's a lot of pressure to perform, and there's a lot of heroic efforts where I think a lot of projects, the work does not get done between the time of 9 to 5. It gets done after work, after school, after weekends. And
absolutely,
I think that there is a bit of energy shifting that's required. From your perspective, though, whose role would that be? Is it they do it themselves? Is it somewhat that's coordinated by HR? Is there a chief heart officer, which is a popularized term these days? Is it just the project manager?
To me, the project manager has to have an awareness and create that space, because it is him, the one, or her, the one that is leading the team, right? But at the same time, the organization, the company, has to have some basis and some standards as well. It cannot only rely on the project managers. You cannot leave the project manager. Off you go. Now, not only you are taking care of business goals, but you are also taking care of personal growth. That wouldn't be fair to them, right? So to me, it's a new way of doing projects and a new way of doing business that kind of aligns with what we are seeing, right? Like well-being is forefront right now on companies, on human resources and so on. Not only because of the situation that we have with COVID and so on, but because it was about time. Like we are not supposed to be little numbers that just go there, like automats, robots, and we are supposed to forget everything that is wrong with us and in our life when we enter and super perform and expect it to be, 1000%. We are humans. So I think there has to be a rethink or a reshuffle on how we combine everything. The fact that we are humans, we are not robots.
Yeah, because you're not talking about spirituality from a religious perspective. You're really talking about the humanizing element, the inner work piece of development of people on projects, and that the spiritual project manager, that's actually a really catchy title. I actually like it really a lot. And I think there is a massive space that's been ignored. I think as well, COVID probably had a bigger impact on mental health than anything we've ever experienced previously, even technology. I think, you know, COVID, particularly in Australia, I don't know how the rest of the world was as strict as we were, but I was in probably one of the most locked down Western cities in the world. And I think that really did play a role in, I don't know what you call it, shutting down some emotions that people were suffering from. And it's probably pushed things down even deeper, if I can say that. And so how do we, and I know Dale's going to jump in soon, but how do we install this? How do we get this out there? What have you been doing to kind of enable this on projects that you've been working on?
Yeah, so since I left TFL, I worked with like two companies. One was is a startup of transformational coaches. Mm-hmm. So what we were doing there, well, they deliver courses, and I helped them organize themselves, and because they needed that structure that a PM can provide. But at the same time, when there were team meetings, when there were things that were showing up, we would create a space to explore it rather than to tell them, oh no, you just get over it and don't be childish or whatsoever. So we basically did a lot of sometimes one-to-one or sometimes in group to uncover what was going on underneath, so that they could understand that it is not about that person saying something to me. There is a 50% of my energy. And that's why I like what you say about the spirituality. For me, is the inner work, shadow work, is that level, that deeper level beyond emotional awareness. Like emotional awareness is more about, I am aware that I'm getting angry right now. Cool, awesome. You are aware, but you don't need to stay just aware of the anger. There is something that you can do so that you can release the anger. And when I came to Mexico, they were starting to organize a TEDx event in Playa del Carmen. So I volunteered as the project manager. I also had it in my list. So that was pretty, synchronized, to be honest. And I was talking to the girl that had the vision, and I was like, listen, I am a project manager, but the reason why I left TFL is because I want to do project management in a different way, like more spirituality and so on. And she was totally on board. So we, for example, had workshops. So we had a workshop where we invited everyone and we gave them a little bit of theory about conflict. So the idea of a trigger, that idea of the 50%, so that they could understand, because this is not something that you are taught in school, right? Like you can need to learn it on your own. So we did that, and then we did as well exercises like self-awareness exercises, answering questions so that they could uncover the root of them. Then we help them with meditations to release that energy. We did another one on fear as the event was approaching, because a lot of people were having stuff coming up, which is normal, right? Like it's a lot of pressure, like in any project, and you are delivering quickly and so on. So to me, it's those workshops, it's creating that space, providing knowledge, but also support. And most of all, allowing people to be a little bit themselves, right? There has to be a safe space for them to say, I'm triggered right now. And it's not about you or the other person or the other one. Don't take it personal. I'm just triggered. So let's go into it. Let's be responsible and look within.
Yeah, no, I think these are great points. And I love the idea of inner work or shadow work beyond emotional awareness, because just knowing that you're upset or you're disappointed or you're angry doesn't fix the problem. You've really got to unpack. And this is my business psychology coming out, but if you really got to unpack where it came from, the root cause, you mentioned maybe something happened to you in your childhood, maybe it's the road rage effect where it's a compound of the same situations over time and you just snap. Maybe you just got some really difficult people to deal with and you haven't been set or provided the tools to deal or cope with those types of situations. There's a whole bunch of work around this, and it's surprising how often this doesn't get talked about, which is the other thing. But just playing devil's advocate, because I think on the wider side, there's a theory that too much work negates the productivity of the team. If you talk about the sensitivity ratio of triggers, because arguably, and I think this is more talking to the listeners in the younger generations, some people are triggered by just, getting up in the morning and having to go into work. They've got kind of these fine line hair triggers that, to be honest, kind of combats or is counterproductive. And the counter argument is around resilience, because I think we've had some podcast guests on talking about grit, and how sometimes you have to just push through. So how do we balance the two? Because we want people who are resilient, that have that grit, that can push on and persevere in the face of adversity. But we also want to be conscious of that inner work, that ability to develop them positively on the project. Do you have any ideas of how would we do that?
Yeah, that's a very interesting point and very true, right? Because so I totally agree. I think for me is whether that trigger, that situation, whether it comes from an empowered place or whether it comes from a victim place. So is it oh, I'm feeling like I don't want to work today? Yeah, kudos. Where is that coming from? Is it like a wishy-washy thing because you don't feel like it, or there is something deeply underneath that is troubling you today? Because if we think, the way that I see life now is that everything happens for me, not to me, right? So if I get triggered, the first thing that I do is look within and I explore it. And sometimes you understand what is going on. You understand the memory that is picking up. You understand the pattern, and you have to say, I'm aware of this. I've done as much as I can, and now I'm going to crack on, because maybe this program is not going to go overnight, right? So it is that thing of not letting the inner work being the excuse to say whatever, because it might be that is your inner child or your, a part of yourself that is like, I don't fancy this, but the, victim type of style. It's not that I have a strong trigger or reason for it. So it's just finding that. To me, that's the balance, where that person is coming from.
Ines, I think you hit it for me. It just cracked for me. You're 100% right. If you're in the empowerment zone, if you are at the cause end of the cause and effect ratio, then you can do inner work. But if you are in the effect zone, as in everything happens to me, why me, then I don't think you're in a position to really work on yourself. You're actually in a different zone. You probably have to unpack a few things first. Actually, that makes a lot of sense as well from a resilience perspective too, because if you know that, well, you decided to be in that role, you decided to be on that project, you decided to have that vocation, you can change any of that, because that is your responsibility to live the life that you want to live. You remember you said you didn't want to be an IT engineer, so you left Spain. By the way, wishy-washy is such a Spanish thing to say. I got a lot of Spanish friends. Even though Abuela says that she says wishy-washy. It's a very strange thing to say, but it's lovely. Very endearing. So I think you're really hopefully cracking open some brains who are listening to this, and they're thinking about it prospectively, and even looking back and saying, well, in some of these situations, was I at the effect? Because hindsight is such a gift. Or was I at the cause? Was I causing this? And I think if you lean towards the cause, you have more ability to change your results in your environment than you do if you are a victim. And I think it's a really good point. Dale, I'll kick it over to you, because you've been waiting patiently there.
I love it. As you say, it's a privilege to, listen in as the first listener to the conversation. And I love it. And I guess, Ines, when you were talking there, one of the things I was thinking around was, something that we use in South Africa a lot is the Afrikaans word for spirit, which is gees. And it's often used with sports teams or individuals. It's like, where's your gees? Show us some gees, show us your spirit. Where's your spirit? Come on, like it's sort of like pull yourself or yourselves together. Let's get on it. And when Val was saying it's almost counter to argue, well, where's the grit? I think it's not. I think it's complementary, because if you do work on your inner self, you gain the grit, right? And the great thing is you mentioned their energy as well, because that's, again, we don't talk about these things enough, right? Projects are boring. We talk about time, cost, and quality. What's the scope? What's the benefits? What are the methodologies? What's the software out there? But actually, people are at the heart of it, right? And whether you are religious or not, there's definitely times where you go, geez, I've got low energy, or geez, I've got high energy today. And that depends on a lot of different factors because we are complex, people are complex in general. You also mentioned a little bit around the workshops you did and things like that around, you know, mindfulness and meditation and things like that. And Val and I certainly, you know, subscribe to that as one. And I don't think I'm as regular as I used to be before, but definitely mindfulness has helped personally. And if nothing else I take away from it is that presenteeism. So as you say, you could have woken up and a few different things have gone wrong. And now you get into this project environment and one thing snaps you. But if you have the ability that you have to practice and attain to be present in that moment, you don't necessarily let all the other noise, let's call it, affect you because you're present in that single moment. And that takes practice. Not everyone can. I couldn't do it. Sometimes I still can't do it. But I found through mindfulness, you get used to being present in that moment. So someone could be really, really, let's say, adversarial towards you. But because you're present in that moment and you're realizing that it might not be you, right? You can react in a way that actually calms the situation down, you know, and go, okay, well, let's actually look at the facts. Or you pick up ways to kind of turn it into something actually constructive. So I'm just gathering my thoughts from everything that you two have discussed. And I'll pause there to see, I see you want to comment.
Well, no, I totally agree. And I think as well, something that is really interesting, and I've come across when I've done some of these workshops, is that one person would say, but this person was rude. Are you just justifying someone being rude? And I'm like, no, that's not right. Right. And but there is a 50% in every conversation, in every interaction, there is 50% of your energy and there is 50% of that other person energy. Someone can be absolutely rude to you, but you might not have any energy that gets triggered with that, and you don't mind as much. You just look at them and you say, you need some inner work yourself, but I'm okay, right? Like you don't get annoyed, you don't get angry, and so on. The moment that someone, rude or not, makes you feel angry, makes you feel uneasy, makes you feel unconfident, then is when I say there is some gold in there for you. Because the truth is as well, every time that I've done it, that I've explored, I always find more peace. I always find more confidence within myself and that lightness, right? So it is almost being able to see those situations, though difficult, and they can be painful, that when we are acting responsibly and with empoweredness, we are empowering ourselves, we can then feel lighter and, you know, be better. They are a gift. That's why spirituality also comes into thinking, well, this is about seeing life from a different point of view, understanding the duality, that sometimes we have to go through shit.
Yeah.
Because that way we take advantage of the light more, we value light more. And actually that both the dark and the light are part of the experience, and they can flip in one given moment. So that mindfulness, that being present, you can realize that everything moves. Now I'm experiencing something that is low vibration. Okay, I'll go into it. But tomorrow I can experience the opposite, you know, and and enjoy it even more. So it's everything passes sort of thing, which sometimes it helps when you're in a very dark situation, in a very difficult place, right?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I just want to share one of the most awesome sayings I saw recently on LinkedIn was, I never knew how strong I was until I had to forgive someone who wasn't sorry.
Yeah.
And accept an apology I never received.
Yeah.
Well, you know, if you just pause to think about that. So absolutely. Let's move on slightly, because I'm interested now. You've done a lot of work with people, evidently, right? Workshops, one-on-ones. Are there common things that you can share with the listeners that people have said help them? Techniques, triggers to look out for, tips, you know, tricks, anything that you can see that's a common trait that you see speaking to various people, and what you actually do to help.
Okay. So the first one that is coming to mind, I think it might be relevant to a few of us in the profession. Certainly it was for me. So one of the reasons why I like project management is that control aspect, even the leadership aspect. I like to be in charge type of thing. And when I started looking into, because sometimes you're in projects and things go south and it's not even for fault of your own, right? I remember working in one of my projects in TFL. The local authority was doing some things and stuff, and it was beyond, I could tell them all the information. I could praise them as much as all the communication and management skills that I could have, but still it was bound to happen, right? And that made me really stressed. And I was like, well, what is this? What is this? And I then realized, for example, that a lot of the times my need for control or my wanting control, and I've seen this in other people as well, was based on me not feeling safe as a kid. And no fault of my parents at all. My parents were lovely. And this is, again, I want to demystify the idea that when we have some dense memory from my childhood, it's because a parent was abusive. Not necessarily. You can have an absolutely loving upbringing and still interiorize things in a particular way, depending on how you are wired, depending on how sensitive you are. And so because I felt unsafe during my childhood, I wanted to control everything. That's why I always make up scenarios and blah, blah, blah. So when I started looking within and going back in my head to those moments in my childhood and almost allowing that pain to come up. Because to me, our subconscious, our shadow, they are just black boxes that are sitting behind deep inside. And we just have to open them. We just have to be brave enough. And I also realized that we are not going to break, that it's going to be okay. And so I went to those memories. That's facilitating that space where you can almost revive them, but knowing that you are safe and allowing that emotion to come up. And that's how you diffuse that box. And that's how you start realizing that was part of the experience and that's okay. And then obviously I can go super hippie and tell you, connect with Mother Earth, because Mother Earth is a lot about safety and trust and stuff like that. So being in the forest helps a lot, for example. Or if a person is a lot about the sea, being by the water, do you know what I mean? Like bringing that external environment to as well help you with that energy.
Yeah, that's interesting. I was chatting to someone the other day and they were talking about earthing. And I was like, what do you mean earthing? Yeah. They said, no, it's a thing. You go and you literally go barefoot and you stand on bare ground and you release all the charge and the static from your body into the ground. And I was like, wow. Yeah. That's really interesting, because in South Africa, we were barefoot all the time, and you walk around all the time, but you don't think about that, okay, you're actually connecting with the earth. And that's obviously, very, very along the lines of what we're talking about today.
If I can add, sorry, actually, it is those native cultures that still have that aspect that can have that relationship with their inner energy and with the environment in a more profound way. The fact that we have source and all that is blocking us because we are in an electromagnetic field. And so, yeah, it makes perfect sense.
Yeah. I mean, maybe on site we'd have health and safety concerns, but imagine that. Yeah, imagine we had, you're working from home these days, go outside to your garden, go barefoot, go step in the garden. Those of you that are working from home. But no, it's fascinating. And I'll give a shout out to Dave Feltman, because he was the one I had the conversation with. I wonder then, you've got your own personal story, and you're opening to, you've shared a little bit there. What was, I mean, you reading your bio, you really sort of just pivoted to go and look internally, and you almost kind of thought you're going to leave project management behind, right?
Yeah.
Could you share what that moment was for you to do that? And then as you go along the story, as you say, you've kind of combined the two again, and what that combination means to you now, and perhaps where you want it to go.
Right. So basically saying a little bit about my bio, right? Like the key bits. So yeah, soon after I got the job that I thought it was the job of my life, because I was project management graduate for TFL. I started in 2011. In 2012, I got sick. I had a fistula. I'm not going to explain it to you guys. You can look it up. It's not pleasant. not pleasant. My team were amazing, and I'm so thankful that I landed with them in that situation because they gave me the space that I needed. I had to be off work for a long time with a lot of surgeries and so on. And doctor said I was never going to heal. And so I had to take matters in my own hands. And I started looking into holistic medicine. So I started looking into meditation, yoga, the food, all of that. And within 6 months, I healed, which was awesome.
Wow.
So the thing is, from that moment on, I started obviously changing my mindset. And I was aware of, when I was having a stress or whatever at work, I would deal with it differently, right? I would do yoga nidra, I would meditate, I knew my tools. And then in 2018, I fell sick again. This was different. This was Hashimoto, which is autoimmune hypothyroid. So I was wiped out. A couple of days, I couldn't get out of bed. And I'm like, whoa, hold on. So I had to go deeper. And by then, I kind of knew that I could heal myself, right? Because we all can. It's just about, get on it in a way and finding the tools that work for us. And so as I was doing that, I realized I went really deep into inner work. I went into self-awareness pretty strongly, uncovering some of these programs about safety and about trust that I was mentioning. And then I was like, wow, I'm helping myself so much. I wish I could, when I was seeing in my team people struggling, I kind of wished that I could help them as well. And if they were friends and I was close with them, I would tell them, or I would do a session with them or whatever. But obviously, I was within the umbrella of TFL. And so it is not possible to introduce something that is so radically different with the human resources parameters, right? It didn't feel right. And so I'm like, well, I want to work on energy, because by then I was really into elemental energy, fire, spirituality. So that's why I left. For me, it was lockdown. During lockdown, I got furloughed, and I was doing what I wanted without having to worry about anything, right? And I was doing a lot of energy work and painting and stuff. And by the time they asked me to come back, I'm like, I can't come back. I'm sorry. So I got an opportunity to join this team that I told you about, transformational coaches, that they needed a PM. And I started doing the PM role in my way, which meant adding the spirituality aspect, adding all the hippie stuff onto it. Then I did it for the TEDx guys. And then is when I realized, hold on, it's the merge of the two things. It's almost like everything has led me to have the perspective of the business and company and structure, but then adding the hippiness, the spirituality aspect, the shadow work. And I don't know, it just feels right. It feels like it's where, in a way, society is going, right? Like if you read Harvard Business Review, it's talking about wellness becoming one of the massive things coming up. Gallup has a lot of stats as well about the importance of mental well-being and wellness for workers and productivity, right? So to me, this is a great way of achieving that. Sorry, long answer, but.
No, it's your answer. There's no time limit.
Yeah, as we said, we will dance around any subject you would like in us. And it is great that you mentioned that. And just on that, the previous conversation around, quotes of interest, I think there is something around gratitude and attitude as well. I read a lot with Earl Nightingale, and if you know, he has a great voice, by the way, if you want to listen to his audiobooks for anyone who's interested. But I felt like when you come from a place of gratitude, somehow that fills your cup up and you have a different perspective on life. So if you wake up and you say, geez, it's great, and you count the things that you have rather than counting the things that you don't have, you should never discount your life, even if it's difficult. And I think that's a center of power that gives you some of that resilience, some of that fire in the belly, some of that spirit that we were talking about earlier. And I hope for those that are struggling and listening to this, Ines, they're inspired by you and your message to work on themselves and not push it further down. I mean, I think there's a lot to talk about around self-healing. My wife would love this because she's a naturopath and she's very spiritual, and she does a lot of that healing. And I think a lot of physical disease is directly connected to emotional oppression. I personally have experienced a lot of that. I've seen a lot of that with friends who have gotten very sick very quickly, physically, because of emotional and mental impacts. which they would refuse to work with. And so there is something about that. So if you're ignoring it and you're listening to this, please go help yourself, get some support, and talk to people that work. Some other points that I think would really be interesting as well on projects is we don't open up enough, I think. And I wanted to talk about trust with you, because I think having safety on projects has to start from somewhere, and you don't want to let people into your inner world often, right? We tend to be guarded because we've had experiences in the past, right, where it's been betrayed, we've been vulnerable, and that's been exposed or exploited, and I think then we become insular. And in the world of business, it's always kind of been separate, you know, kind of, I'm going back to, I'm getting old now, but, you know, 10, 20 years ago that, you know, you wouldn't talk about your feelings. You wouldn't, you know, if you're having a bad day, that's your problem, but you come to work and we're paying you to be a project manager or whatever it's going to be. And you put that hat on. And then you come home and you're literally exhausted because you've been carrying around not only the responsibilities of the role that you're in, but the emotional baggage that either was affected by that day or previous days, or is compounded by lots of experiences. And I think we're missing that deeper connection with people, particularly maybe because we're more remote now. I don't think it's gone. I just think we need to re-plug in. Maybe it's connecting back to the earth and recharging. Maybe it's actually having more meaningful and deeper conversations. And I think the other bit, which is interesting, I'd love to get your opinion on this, is what they're calling the Great Resignation. What I'm calling is just people looking for deeper meaning and purpose. They've reassessed their lives. They've had the ability to have introspective forced upon them by isolating during COVID. And now they're like, wait a second, you're telling me I get up every day and I got to listen to this person absolutely not aligned with any of my values, and I could be doing this thing over here, which I've kind of wanted to do all my life, but I've never really had the courage or whatever it is, the energy or the reason to, and they're starting to move in alignment with their values. Now, I think that's a great thing, because I believe, as you picked in university, PMs for you, you really got to figure out what it is that you're meant to be here on the earth to do, because life is short. What's your view on that, and any of the things I just mentioned?
Yeah, and I'm really happy you bring that up, because there is this situation that most of us have faced, where we enter the office and we are supposed to be in office mode, right? And to me, it is that ability to maybe change our perception of the office and our team in the office. So rather than having the two lives, because sometimes we are a little bit Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, and I understand that, right? There is valid reasons for it. There is a lot of stuff that might have happened to us with trust and so on, but also seeing the work as an opportunity to help us develop ourselves further, right? So that when we are in a job, it is not about improving my skills as a communicator, for example, technical skills, right? Whatever your role is, whether it's marketing, engineering, PM. But those people that are in your team, they are also like your companions for your personal journey. So if we are able, and that's how I started seeing it every time that I'm working with someone, it is not that this is my work colleague and then I have my friend and stuff like that. It's like my work colleague potentially can also have some spiritual agreements with me to trigger me so that I can heal. So it's removing that fear from the triggers and seeing people in a different way. And in that way, my view or my aspiration would be that we are able to see work as an extension of our life, not our life, but as a part that help us with our personal growth. Because that Great Resignation, younger generations that want that purpose. And certainly I'm the one that follows that path as well. I've moved a lot because I followed my heart. And I think I'm hoping that society allows a space for everyone to be able to do that, right? Because there are many considerations when you're aiming to do that. But it is that ability to see it like a positive rather than an imposition, and to link the two up so that it is helping you in your personal journey. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it does. Absolutely. I completely agree. You actually touched on another point, which I think is important as well. When you do self-work or when you're trying to be an effective person in your role, how do you stay positive? Because my view is it's a downhill slope. So negativity breeds negativity. And I believe that it's easier, and maybe it's the way the mind is constructed, but it is easier to negate the positive. It's easier to be negative. It's an easy thing to do. It's easy to criticize people. I mean, we do it when we have live TV shows. Everyone's bloody watching maths. You know, people love to critique other people, judge other people, pull down other people. That's not really a spiritual journey. And I'm wondering, other tools and techniques in us for maintaining positivity, even when your own inner work isn't quite where you need it to be, without being fake or, you know, disingenuous. You don't want to be just positive for the sake of being positive. But I think that there's a story around, or a mantra around, trying to find the light in every situation. How do you do that?
Yeah, there is that balance, right? Like, it's not about looking only at the rainbows or seeing everything like a rainbow, because if there is crap underneath, you're gonna need to work through that to really see the rainbow. But I'm totally with you. Like, being able to stay grateful is definitely is a positive thing to do. So what I would say, or some of the tools that you can do, obviously, is, I think, and this is coming as well from my own experience, I used to think a lot about the negatives, or even, for example, if I had a vision and I had a dream, I would focus a lot on the gap, like the gap that I'm not having, right? So if my ideal life was living abroad and doing this and this and this, but I was doing 5 of the things, but still not one of them, I would focus on the one, which is focusing on the negative, right? And I think I've learned, and I found a lot of relief into looking at the other 4 and seeing it like a journey, rather than saying, okay, so I have this vision and it has to be all perfect right now. Well, this is a journey. There are stages as well. And from my vision, from my perfect life, I already have X, Y, Z. How awesome I am, right? How awesome am I that I already have this? Let me put some plans in place with intention and with some thinking, focus, intention, and action, so that I can work on the stuff that is not there. Because as well, I think it's important to have intention and action and courageous action, not just saying, okay, not that is my case, right? But I want to buy a car, but I don't have money. Well, okay, how are you going to find a solution to that? Not just focusing on, I don't have the car, or I don't have the car that I want. That to me, sorry, no, I was just going to say that to me, focusing on what you have, and then having a plan and an intention, and you know, even write it down and with a schedule and so on, so that you can then motivate yourself, right? That you do one of the actions. It takes will, but then you need to work on, you know, on that if you are finding that resistance, but then you can always feel that you are moving forward.
Yeah, 100%. Agree with everything you just said. And, you know, like everything else in this planet, it is, you know, money is energy too. I truly believe that it flows to those that shine the brightest. And it is a long game. I read a book that I still look back and flick through pages around the infinite game. I think there's something around patience as well. So, you know, reward comes through a process, and it's not necessarily something that you'll get tomorrow. And I think with the live streaming generation we have today, they kind of want to jump from graduate to senior director, managing everything, which, you know, to be fair, they probably could do a pretty good job on a lot of the fronts from my experience, but still you're missing that really important and crucial element of failures, battle scars, conflict, just falling over and smashing your face and then getting back up again. And I always draw inspiration from martial arts, because I've always had martial arts in my life, and I've always been fascinated by that element of discipline that they have. And, you know, you could study a craft, but you're not going to get your belt grade until you are ready, if it's a good gym, right? But if you really dedicate yourself to the craft, then you get the next stage, and you get the next stage. But you're only given, for good reason, right? You're only given a certain amount of skills. You're only shown a certain amount of styles and methods, because that's what you're ready for. And I think life in general, the universe in general, does that for us. And we had a similar situation the other day. We had a whole bunch of things just happen all at once. You know, there was some people who passed away. There was some things that happened financially, some things that happened in work, and it all kind of crunched down. And my wife was like, what is going on? I said, no, it's okay. Because I've learned that through martial arts, we can do two things in a situation when there's conflict. We can react or we can respond. One is measured with intent, as you perfectly said, Ines, and the other one is just whatever happens. And I think through discipline, I've learned that you need to, in project management, be responsive. And that might mean not necessarily writing that email, or as soon as someone says something you don't like, not necessarily filling the air with your opinion. You know, it's just taking that step back. I've learned this from Dale as well. He's probably far more patient than I am. But I think that element of having intent, centering yourself, you know, these things have all come from martial arts, and then responding to the situation in front of you with the right skill set, right, is a way to deal with it. Have you have any similar situations, and what, you know, have you had a coping mechanism to deal with that react response method?
Well, as you were talking, I was thinking a lot about, I can't remember the name of this, I think he's a psychologist, but this, her work is based on fixed mentality or growth mentality, right? And it's this idea of that we all have fixed mentality for some things and growth mentality for other ones. Fixed mentality is basically when you try something and it doesn't work and you feel you are not good enough. You feel that the skills that you have are not good enough, and that's it. And the growth mentality people are more into the, oh, let me see how I can improve for the next time. I haven't succeeded yet, but they add that yet in there. And so I recognize, even as a project manager, when I was having a challenge and the local authority or the designers or whatever throw me a curveball, I always thought that it was my fault. I always thought that I fucked it up. And even my managers, bless them, they would say to me, no, Ines, you did everything that you could. There was no way that you could have done anything else. But it's when you come from this fixed mentality or this, you know, this basic program of not good enough, and you end up reacting in a way, you react emotionally, or you bring yourself down basically. And then I started learning how to move into, okay, I've done X, Y, Z. That was around my control, my knowledge, what I could foresee, what it was a best practice. So even doing forgiveness, you know, and acknowledging myself and being kind to myself. I think sometimes, well, I would say I'm my worst critic. I don't know about you guys, but I used to hammer myself a lot. And actually that does not help. That to me is as well stuff that I've learned to look into and release. So being able to see things from a growth mentality, from, okay, how can I improve for the next time? And how many, you know, people that are super successful say what you said, right? Like, it is about the journey, you learn, it's not a mistake, it's a learning opportunity. So doing a lot of that reframing and rephrasing, so that it's not like you feel stuck and, oh my God, I'm doomed.
Yeah, no, I agree. And it does remind me again of that infinite game. And my point was that, you know, you set the plan, but then you let the plan set kind of fizzle away, and you just appreciate every day for what it is. And the process will naturally come if you've set the right goals. I don't know if it's in a schedule or not, but it would be something that you would plan anyway. And I agree. I mean, the passion I think I have is the same as yours, Ines, around project management. But my words were, I love the idea of turning chaos to order. And I wonder where that came from. And when I unpacked it, it was like, well, when I was a child, it was chaotic. It was crazy. There was always stuff happening. It was very dramatic. And so when I got older, I was like, well, now that's what I want to do. I want to turn situations into control. And I think I always said this to Dale, you know, I said, everyone who's in project management has some type of emotional damage. You know, something's happened to them to make them want to control things. And it's a really effective sport, because project management is the one area that is rewarded, because that's what they want. That's what we need. We need to get things done, built, and out the door. So it's a very fascinating passion that we all share. But yeah, Dale, over to you, mate.
Thanks. I think you bring up a really important point in this. You know, we can sometimes care too much, right? Because in one sense, you can go, oh, people don't care enough. They just come in, they do their 9 to 5, this is my job, this is what I do, I don't care. And that could also be construed as almost a fixed rather than a growth mindset. I'm just coming in, doing my 9 to 5, I'm going home, collect my paycheck, whatever. But then there's the other side of the coin where, okay, well, I care too much. In your case there, it's me, it's, you know, I care so much about making this work that it must be me. It must be me. And that's where you got to have a bit of empathy for yourself. We always talk about having empathy for others, right? But what about self-care and self-protection, right? Because it's all good and well being a project manager or a leader in a project management environment and creating psychological safety for others. But what about yourself? If you can't create it for yourself, then you'll really struggle to create it for others, right? And I just wanted to offer up something different to what yourself and Val was talking about earlier around positivity. For me, it's not so much positivity. For me, it's more about optimism, because you can't always be positive in every situation, right? Because if someone's really down, if someone's really had something serious go on, you can't be positive all the time, but you can be optimistic. And for me, it's around optimism. And I wonder if you had thoughts on that. I don't think it's a positivity versus optimism thing. I think it's just recognizing a situation and what tool, as you say, to use in that situation.
Yeah, and I totally see your point, and I also feel it's about this duality, right? Sometimes it's one of the things that I struggled the most when I started the inner work for myself, the trusting in the process, trusting in the journey, and this thing that a lot of people in the spiritual world would say of, you know, we are a soul living a human experience, and there is the duality. And so when I got a lot of stuff coming up and I work through it, and then I see that another layer comes on, because this is not like a linear process, right? It's a little bit like an onion, and there are layers, and then they get all entangled, and you shift through some pattern, and you know, and you say, oh, I'm staying optimistic because I've moved through these layers. So okay, and then 2 months later you have a trigger that is even bigger than the one that you went through, and you're like, oh my god, what the heck, I thought that I had resolved this. But it gets to the point where you learn the game, right? You learn your tools, how it's working for you, what are those programs, you are aware, and you don't take it so hard into yourself, because you see, okay, this is temporary in a way, right? Like I'm in shit right now. There is this problem coming up, but let's keep optimistic in that regard and say, okay, with a growth mindset, what can I do different? How can I improve? How can I be? And totally agree, kindness to ourselves. As I said, I'm my worst critic. I think I'm not the only person.
Yeah.
And it's really important, because I realized as well, as I have been able to forgive myself and be kinder to myself, I'm also kinder to others. So as you totally said, I totally agree with that. Empathy, for us to be able to be more empathic with other people, it starts with us. And this is not about, because some people might say, oh yeah, but so-and-so did something wrong, I cannot be empathic to them. Well, they might have done something wrong, right? They might have missed a deadline. You might even think that they did it on purpose because they are not agreeing with your way of doing it and so on. But seriously looking at it as an opportunity. Why is it hurting you so much that one of your teammates or one of the people that you are responsible for their work are not doing the things that they are supposed to? Do you feel that perhaps it's reflecting bad on you? Because that is not necessarily the case. And so that's an opportunity for you to let go of that control, right? Because I had a lot of that. Because I needed everything to be perfect. When one of my people in my team did something that maybe was not up to a standard or whatever, I took it really like, oh my God, you know, like I'm going to be fired type of thing. And everyone could see that was not going to be the case, right? So how can we remain optimistic, remain in a growth mindset, and be kind, and seeing everything as an opportunity to release something that is not serving us?
Yeah, absolutely. I love your onion analogy. Ever since I watched Shrek, that stuck with me forever. Did you watch Shrek back in the day? You didn't.
I think I need to watch it.
You have to go and watch Shrek. Shrek, Donkey is my favorite character in that Shrek movie. I watched all of them. I've even got my kids watching it now, which is fantastic. But we digress. Hey, Ines, look, it's been an amazing time chatting to you, but we want to make a little bit of time for the features. So I don't know if you know how the features go, but we've got two features. One is called Defend the Indefensible, and it's a ridiculous statement that you have to defend for 30 seconds. Okay, so in other words, I'm going to read the statement and you have to argue for it. Okay, so you have to defend the statement. Are you ready?
Yeah.
Only 30 seconds. So you have to argue for this. Looking internally is a waste of time. We could be using it to deliver the project.
Yeah, if I spend all my time looking internally, all I'm going to find is more crap, is more layers, more stuff. It's never going to end. So what's the point? Because it takes so much time and effort. And when I am looking within, I'm not going to be able to deliver work because, there is this deadline and this other deadline. And if I'm journaling or meditating, that's super counterproductive. I'm not going to be able to send that email or, have that chat or put that person into their deadline. So I really, really think we just should crack on with it.
Natural, more than 30. Well done. Thank you so much for being such a great sport. We have one more for you. It's called Fiverr. It's just 5 quick fire questions. So when you're ready?
Yeah.
Okay, question 1. Steak, seafood, or salad?
Seafood.
Question 2. What are the 3 must-have behaviors you look for in successful project teams?
Collaboration, communication, compassion is coming up.
3 C's. Love it.
Yeah.
I like that. Yeah.
Yeah. Question 3. What is one piece of advice for people new to the project profession?
Manage people the way that you would like to be managed.
Love that. Yeah, agreed. Number 4. If you could go back to one moment in your life, what would it be and why?
Something's coming up about me when I started uni and maybe choosing a different career.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
I would have ended up in project management as well, but maybe not through IT,
Fair enough. And you'd still be here with the Project Chatter podcast. So there we go.
It was meant to be.
Question 5. Which superpower would you choose to have for a day and why?
Oh, flying. So that I could see everything and go everywhere.
Amazing. I think that's, is that 2 we've had in a row? Flying, Val?
Oh, yeah?
I think Tim Creasy said flying as well.
So,
the
yeah.
last one. Yeah.
You did.
So there we go. Flying's a popular choice this time of the year. Amazing. Ines Lopez, it's been amazing to spend the best part of an hour with you. But before we let you go, do you have any final thoughts you want to leave our listeners with?
Just, I guess, if there is something that is not making you happy, right? Whether when you are at work, whether in a conversation with a loved one, being aware of it, using emotional intelligence, for sure. But that energy doesn't have to stay with you. And a lot of the times we are told that, this is the way we are and so on. I've changed so much. Like if you've met me 5 years ago, like, oh my gosh, you can't release a lot of the stuff that is preventing you from being who you truly want to be, because we all have that light within. And it's just layered with programs and limiting beliefs and cultural stuff and all of that. So if there is something in your mind that you have coming up a lot and is bugging you and is not making you happy, just find a way. There is a way to release it. You just have to be willing and, empower yourself to go and look for a way of doing it. Because we are meant to be lighting, shining little people.
Wow, thank you. And so many lessons in your story today. I'm with you there in terms of me as well. If some people knew me 5 years ago to how I am today, they'd also say, wow, not the same person. But Val, over to you. Any final thoughts?
No, I agree. Ines, absolute pleasure to have you. I think hopefully we've unlocked some ideas and some introspection for people listening to the podcast. Again, our purpose of doing this, Ines, is to pay it forward. And we appreciate you being on the spiritual journey with us as part of our members in episode 114. Can you believe it? So thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, guys. It's been a pleasure.
It's been our pleasure and privilege. So, folks, you've heard it. That's all we have time on this episode. But remember, you can help us pay it forward by sharing a link if you've enjoyed what you've heard on your social media platforms. A massive thank you once again to our guest, Ines Lopez, and thank you all for listening. Till next time, we say stay safe, be disruptive, and have fun doing it. From me and Val, it's bye for now.